I haven't even had a cup of coffee yet. I'm not even drinking this.
Walters
I'm, like,
is
fired up.
worked up.
Okay.
Walters is pro 10-year mortgage only.
My heart rate's 90 right now, sitting down. Okay. Welcome to the Market Moment. My name is Matt Walters, and I am here with Eli Freeman
Excited to be here.
and Lee Mackey.
Hey, good morning.
We've got a few topics we want to touch on real quick, but hope you guys are having a great week. Before we get into that, remember to join the growing Market Moment online community by hitting the subscribe button. Give us a like, comment. We really appreciate it. It goes a long ways. So just jumping into things. So Harris came out and proposed raising the corporate tax rate back to 28%, not back to, but to 28%, rolling back some of the Trump tax cuts. Trump cut taxes in 2017, taking the corporate tax rate, the top marginal corporate tax rate from 35 to 21. Harris said she wants to take it back to 28. Thoughts? Oh,
Expected.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
I mean, I don't see many reasons that she needs to be proposing that other than just for some political motivation of saying that she's going to raise tax on big corporations. Sounds nice. The tax cuts are currently set to sunset in
End of 25.
End of 2025 into 2026, barring an act of Congress. And so it's not necessarily beneficial to say, okay, tax cuts right now, or taxes on corporations right now are 21%. I want to propose them to go to 28 as soon as I get into office, and then potentially rates are going back to 35% the next year. It sounds more like it's, and not trying to be political. Even if Trump said this, I would say this still sounds political because it's such a short-term fix to something that already has a long-term solution currently in place.
You know, it's low-hanging fruit. The last thing she wants to do is hit individual taxpayers. Maybe, who knows if they sunset and they can't reach a deal before the end of 25, maybe we would be happy with 28 versus rolling it back to 35. But, it seems like some of her proposals and some of the Democrat proposals, I don't want to say anti-corporate, but there is a strong, anti-corporate theme through a lot of their policies. And, it's not surprising. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is a low-hanging fruit, that she wants to be seen as a champion for the middle class, the lower class. I don't get a lot of what she says, obviously, but I don't get the whole, hey, let's go after businesses, right? I mean, yeah, it's easy to say, hey, Amazon is evil and, these huge companies are bad and make so much money. It's okay, that's a handful of companies that are, that huge. Mm-hmm. Most businesses are not, right? Your small, privately owned, family-owned businesses still employ a majority of Americans. Yeah. And those are families. Those are individuals. So when you say, hey, let's go after businesses, let's make corporations pay higher taxes. I mean, it's that's people, right? I mean, it's a legal structure, and sure, it's a company, but that's a company that's owned by a family or a group of people, and so this just combative, tone towards anti-business. I just don't get it because it's those are the businesses and the people and the families that are employing people, right? So we can have a debate around what should the tax rate be and where. But the tone, I mean, you just get that tone that's we're against big corporations and we're against businesses. I'm how does that make sense to anybody?
Mm-hmm. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I'm pro less taxes, less regulation. And anytime that I hear more taxes, there has to be some really substantial or backed by data reason that I would even get behind an increase in taxes. Just more taxes, more regulation, less capitalism, less freedom of people, less freedom of choice.
Well, we talk about, so you got Apple and Amazon. I just keep tossing those out. But those big corporations, those are also a lot of the companies that are innovating, that are making massive investments in new innovations, new technologies. And so it's okay, you say we want to be, the most innovative country in the world and the most technologically advanced, and we want to keep keep being the place to go to make those investments and all. It's like, well, you can't do that and then tax the crap out of companies and, make it more and more difficult for them to make those investments. So really it comes down to what's more important. Do you want to make a point and tax businesses at a high rate and try to increase some revenue, or do you want to keep that competitive advantage and that edge so that we can keep being a leader in all of these industries?
Her wish list on the spending side, I think, if those were all to take place, we would have to raise revenue somewhere. Expanding the child tax credit, additional subsidies for housing, for health care. You got to raise that money somewhere. The one debate that I know is going to be happening, and it is about every 3 or 4 years, is the estate tax. That's not part of what we're talking about here, but you want to talk about a place to gain revenue. You could leave the income tax rates alone, and you just you take the income tax, the estate tax credit back to where it was when early in my career. It was $600,000. When I came out of law school and I began my career, we were dealing with $600,000 individual exemptions. So a married couple could leave $1.2 million without estate tax, and now it's what?
24
Our tax, I encourage you to sit down and think about how many times a single dollar is taxed, right? The number of times and the transactions that you go through on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and how many times you're taxed at the various levels. It's, in my opinion, this sounds like extreme, but I think it's criminal. I really do. I think when you look at, okay, you're gonna take a tax off the top. So just the idea of an income tax, which I'm anti income tax in general. I'm much more pro
It's a strong statement.
I am. I'm much more pro consumption tax, right? But you're not only going to have income tax off the top, you're going to have consumption tax. You're going to have estate tax. You're going to have federal taxes, local taxes, property taxes.
Yeah.
When you buy something, you pay taxes. When you, when
you sell for gains, you pay taxes.
When a vehicle is bought brand new, you pay taxes. When it's bought used, you pay taxes. It's just like, and then they talk like, hey, we need to find new creative ways to generate revenue. I'm like, I don't think that's where the problem is, right?
No.
You're taxing every transaction, every dollar, multiple times. And so I think it's the other side of the equation.
If you look at high-income earners, by the time that you get through all of the taxes that you just listed, you're in the ballpark of 50 to 60, probably leaning higher towards the 60% of all income is going. 60% is going to taxes. 40% is remaining for.
Especially in some, easily in some states.
Oh, depending on your state, you could probably get into the 65, 68%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, anyways,
it will be. As we tell our clients, the president can say all they want. Congress has to pass it, and if we have a divided Congress continuing, there's not going to be a whole lot of radical change happening. I'm going to shut up after this because I'm starting to get fired up. But I'm curious as to how you really feel.
Any politician who's out there saying that just rely on us, we'll take care of you, we'll increase, we'll increase taxes on the rich and give you. It's like I just go look at other nations around the world today, not even historically, today that have done that or are trying to do that, and then go back historically and look. It's like it doesn't work. Do you really want to be dependent on the federal government? And is that really the best structure for what we want the future to look like? And it's wild that we're sitting here talking about that, but that is what the Democratic Party is pushing. When you really get down to it, is just let us take care of you. And these ideas of, hey, we'll test things with universal basic incomes and increasing taxes, and it's a slippery slope, and we need to be careful.
We have a spending problem. That's bottom line.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a topic I'll throw out here. We mentioned it before. A 40-year mortgage. John Hope, an entrepreneur here in America, an Operation Hope founder, wrote an op-ed throwing out the idea of a 40-year mortgage. He said it, should be tied to financial literacy programs, working with the Federal Home Loan Bank. He essentially throws it out there as an idea since, home ownership is becoming harder and harder for the average American, young couples, young people. What do you think?
I don't like it. Sorry, you weren't.
I don't have a fully thought out thoughts. I don't have full thoughts on this, but I almost think that that's anti-home ownership. Like my initial thought is to think that if we're going to say throw a 40-year mortgage out there, someone gets a house and they purchase it at 30, say they upgrade again at 40, they're never going to own outright a home probably till they're 80.
If they just make the
minimum payments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a case to me to say that that's just home ownership or renting is the same thing if you don't own it.
If you always have a payment.
If you always have a payment, like the bank owns my home. I don't own it because I don't own every bit of it.
Yeah.
So I almost think that's just a different form of saying let's try and get rents down.
I just don't know how you could do, how does that make sense from a business perspective? If, if rates are low, for example, is that a fixed, I assume?
Well,
is it 40-year fixed or is it variable at some point?
His proposal was federal subsidies for mortgage rates between 3.5% to 4.5% for those who complete a certified literacy course.
Here we go back to federal subsidies.
Subsidies would be capped at $350,000 for rural mortgages and $1 million for urban markets, reflecting the varying cost of home ownership across the country.
It would be interesting to see how banks would price that. If it would even be that beneficial to go out 40 years with them increasing rates for a 40-year loan.
That would be interesting. Amortizing it over 40 years obviously helps.
Sure.
Right? That's the biggest.
Helps in the form of lower monthly payments.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
That's his whole
it.
point. That's his whole point.
Yeah.
But if I'm the bank, right, going back to the business side of it, this has to be profitable.
What if it's not going to be run to it? What if it's going to be
I'm out. Then I'm so against it. I'm already anti 40-year mortgage, I think. But if it's a federally run program, now where
isn't
I think
it kind of like the 8-year, car loan? It's people want new cars, they can't afford them, so let's just kick it up to 5 to 6 to 7.
We're not solving the problem. We're just softening the blow, I think, and the 40-year mortgage. Now, if you say hey, you can amortize over 40 years but the rate's adjustable at 20 and then again at 30 and you build in some protection on the business side.
Sure.
I think, okay, well, let's talk about that. And I haven't ran the numbers and
I just did an amortization on a 40-year, $300,000 loan, 8% interest because I adjusted for the cost of a 40-year amortization schedule. At the end of year 10, so $300,000 loan, they would have paid just over $18,000 towards principal.
That's $150 a month.
10% would have been $30,000. So they would have paid 8% of principal
in 10 years.
So it's well, how much more sure, it makes the payment, but to Eli's point, it's you don't own much of the home. Right?
You're just renting for cheaper.
I think it's truly, it's all about this article, this op-ed, lower monthly payments, the idea of expanding home ownership.
Because
let's expand financial literacy so people just understand how to run their finances.
How do people make purchases now? How is that 8-year car loan sold? It's, hey, I can get you a new car for the same payment you've got now.
Yeah.
It's not on the total cost. That's how homes are going to be sold. That's how some homes are already sold.
That $60,000 car is going to cost.
What do we need your monthly payment at? Let me do this window.
That's it.
And so, would that be inflationary for homes, right? Because people that...
Yeah, now we're just going to say 15% interest on a 60-year loan.
Yeah. When do you stop?
60-year loan.
And this, Let's
get your payment in range.
I still don't... Now, it's easy for me to say because I'm not in this position as a first-time home buyer trying to buy a home right now, okay? But so this may be, I may get blown up on it, but the idea that
you can't be a first-time home buyer and go buy a home right now. I still don't believe that's true. I think a big part of the problem, Lee's like, dude, you're about to get just whacked. So
scooting over.
A big part of the problem is, and we've talked about this in the past, is expectations in a first-time home. And what are you getting as a first-time home? Because I remember, like, our first-time home, and I know a lot of people that I know and grew up with and people older than me, their first-time homes were modest at best, right? And needed a ton of updates, even repairs. And, like, you're buying that and, like, hey, we're, like, this is not that great of a house, but, like, this is our first step. And there are people out there doing that, absolutely.
Yes.
But when they talk about people can't afford first-time homes, it's like, well, can you afford a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 3,000 square foot house in town? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But, like, I couldn't either back when I bought a house.
Yeah.
Right? And so
especially if this gets into government subsidies being a 40-year, then I would say take every dollar of government subsidies and let's go teach people how to run a proper credit score, run a proper budget, and get your finances in order. And if we can get people with higher credits, we'll get them into mortgages that are more affordable. If they can run a budget, then they can make sure that they purchase a house that they can afford. And it might take a couple years. It might take 5-10 years to get into a home, but it's possible. And it takes effort. It takes work. It takes time. The idea of saying, let's stretch it out so that it's possible for everyone. Home ownership is extremely expensive. And if people aren't running budgets, an unexpected HVAC expense is going to ruin people. And it's worth, I think, in my opinion, very, very jaded opinion towards financial literacy, is financial literacy is going to be much more important than just trying to make costs easier.
Sure.
And what is federal student loan programs and the extension of the, like, how far out you can cast those, you can defer those. What has that done to tuition? Because I would make the argument that is one of, if not the leading driver to tuitions going up like they've gone up over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Easy money.
Absolutely.
And so if you're a university, you're like, these kids can borrow money for 30 years at a low rate. They can defer it while they're in school. Then there's not as much competition to try to keep prices low.
Sure.
Right? You can just be like, hey, we can increase because they can afford it. So all of this is so intertwined because now you got kids coming out of college with 10 times the amount of student debt that they should ever have. And it's not all, I'm not saying it's all their fault. Like, it's just structural. And then now that trickles into, okay, now they've got a $800 student loan payment. And so, yeah, that does affect their ability to buy a first-time home, right? And so it's all so intertwined.
You know, to that note, my numbers are off a little bit, but, President Biden just forgave some additional student loan borrowers. And one of the qualification was if you've been paying on your loan, I think 10 or 15 years, and you owe more now than you did when you came out of school. It's just mind-boggling.
Gut-wrenching.
That's what I'm saying. That to me, maybe not to the same extent, but that to me is what you could get or could see with a 40-year mortgage. Is
possible.
Is you're trying to make it more affordable for people. So what are the unintended consequences?
Oh, home prices.
Yeah, I mean, so
supply and demand.
I think
economics 101.
You're telling me I was qualified for $300,000 of a house.
Now it's
I'm
$1 million
for $600,000.
Yeah. Because if you believe in markets, right, and free open markets, then prices will adjust to what people can afford.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the more the government gets involved or the more they try to get creative, the more manipulated the system is and the market is, and the less you're going to have like fair and free prices versus if you just get out of it. And if it's true that, hey, no one can afford these first-time home buy, the market will correct that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It will.
Lower taxes.
Man, I haven't even had a cup of coffee yet. I'm not even drinking this.
Walters is worked up.
Okay.
Walters is pro 10-year mortgage only.
My heart rate's 90 right now, sitting down. Okay. So, all right, last topic. Eli wanted to talk about the market. So,
yeah,
market's been strong.
Several different things to go through. So, I've got several tweets to go through. I'll just throw some stuff out there. You guys can look at it. The first thing isn't a tweet. It's actually just looking at what the market has done since the market bottom from the recent sell-off. So
When was that? August?
the end of
1st?
July, beginning of August.
Yeah.
So August 5th was what I could find as the bottom of the market. What I've done is I've pulled quite a few different markets, looked from August 5th till now. Everything's positive. Gold's up 4%, crude oil up 9%, NASDAQ 10%, Russell 2000 6%, S&P 8%, Dow Jones 5%, Bitcoin 12%. So everything.
Bitcoin. He had to throw Bitcoin. He's like listing all these major indices, and then he's like Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. I mean, he's 20 something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're keeping it fun. So that from August 5th, that's everything to today. Just an interesting to see. Market sell-off, people felt pretty bad. Now we're coming back with some pretty major swings.
I mean, we started the day 1% off of the all-time highs.
Well, that's a good reminder. So I know Monday, so Thursday, Friday, that weekend when the market really kind of sold off. There's like Thursday, Friday, and then Monday you woke up and you're like, oh snap. And people weren't like freaking out, but that's where you're kind of on if that turned into Tuesday, Wednesday, it's like people are starting to get really nervous. And it's a good reminder that like you can't let your emotions get involved, because the markets come back strong, and we're almost right back to where we were. And so if you had sold, like, that would have been a pretty material setback if you would have sold and tried to get back in now.
And it kind of goes to what we were talking about last week. Eli, I don't think you were on the podcast where we were talking about there was so much, expectation that the Fed was going to do 50 in September, and then the numbers came out on that Wednesday, Thursday, which rocked the markets, which, they're not going to do 50. They may not even lower rates. And I mean, we're just tied to every headline that comes out of the Fed now, it seems like.
And I wouldn't hate to see some pressure right here, just a little bit of volatility continued, leading into the September, what we expect to be the rate cut. Because if it all comes before that, you just kind of wonder how far out you get over your skis. And
I would say, I don't know if this is compliant or not, but I would say that we're probably a little overbought right now. I mean, we're getting a little bit out like we were 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Interesting. So there's a tweet from Ryan Dietrich. This is an election year type of tweet. I think many people are always interested to see tweets like this. Yeah. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel so that you can see what it looks like. But this is stock market returns in the months of an election year, going back to 1928. Average return in May, 2%, June, 7.3%, July, 5.2%, and August, 2.1%. So some of the strongest months are June, July, and August. After that, August is 2, September's 0.6, October's 2, November's 3, December's 0.6. So kind of this middle part of the year in an election year has historically been some of the strongest months. Any thoughts on reasoning why that might be, or?
No.
I mean, no. Okay. I mean, there's really not. I mean,
I think isn't like September, October, two of the like worst months? Not just an election year.
Correct.
I know September
yes.
is like kind of a
historically a tough month on the market.
A tough month.
Yeah.
And then you generally see some strength going into the end of the year, right? And you might call it the Santa Claus rally right at the tail end of the year, going into the new year. And so, if we see some volatility here, end of August through September, every year's different, but that wouldn't be like.
And I don't know how much weight you give this, but we're trading at about a 21 forward PE on the markets.
Historical average is what?
About
18?
16, 17.
Yeah, something like high teens. So,
so either earnings have to continue to improve, or
we need to,
like you said, it needs to pull back a little bit. Earnings have remained relatively strong. We're finishing up the earnings season right now. NVIDIA reports, I think, later this week. That's going to be the big one. But other than that,
don't quote me on this, but I saw one tweet saying that NVIDIA within most funds is at a holding of 9.6%. So,
and that goes back to the point of, not to go down this rabbit hole, but knowing what you own, right? Because you could be invested and you feel like you're diversified and you've got 4 or 5 different funds. Mm-hmm. They all own the same freaking things.
Well,
right?
NVIDIA, you got a 15% position in a single stock.
You got 10% NVIDIA in every one of your funds, and you don't even know it.
And you may start it out at 1% or 2% NVIDIA.
Yeah.
And because of the price, go ahead. Another
So
one.
existing home sales in July fell to the lowest record in July on record. That's according to Redfin.
Existing home sales.
Existing home sales. I actually did a video on this, so I'll speak a little bit about this. With existing home sales, higher interest rates have caused people not to sell. New home sales, if you look at new home sales, are spiking like crazy.
Yeah.
So existing home sales are low, new home sales are high. People are still buying houses, and that's not slowing
People
down.
just don't want to sell.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
just don't want to sell their house. So existing home sales makes sense. They're
Yeah.
down. So this one was interesting. There's a guy that I follow on Twitter that I love what he tweets. It's a car dealership guy. All he does is post different things about used cars, new cars, things like that. Dealership profits are plummeting despite stable sales. If you read through it, basically the reason that dealership profits are plummeting is holding costs. So to finance the cars that are on the lot is costing them so much that their profits are plummeting. People are still buying.
Interesting you said that. We were headed to Searcy this weekend, and I stopped in Conway and I just drove through a dealership. Didn't want to get out,
Slippery slope.
bad. So, and I actually went down a dead end, and the guy was coming towards us. I'm in
trapped.
reverse and
Trapped.
backed up. But here's what I found: the car lot packed. I mean,
With people or cars?
cars.
Oh.
And I called a friend of mine who his company owns some dealerships, and he said that post-COVID, they had, they just ramped up their inventory. And he said, other than a couple car makers, Toyota I think is one, they didn't manage it very well, and the car lots are packed with new cars.
Remember during COVID, you drove by a car lot and they'd
There
have
were
like,
none.
They'd have
Yeah.
like 3 cars on
Yeah.
the lot.
Yeah.
And they'd have them like spaced out to make it look like
So
they
it-
were-
No
tells
wonder.
me-
No wonder interest on holding costs is
Oh.
more now.
I mean, he said this, it's become a pretty big issue. I mean, it was surprising to me, but he said that, you'll probably see some,
It's either going to be fire sales or they're going to be reluctant to sell it, just losses.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it could go either way depending on the.
I think you'll see some deals.
Yeah.
As we roll into the new year.
Well, a lot of these, and I know nothing about the car industry, but I think I've heard that a lot of these dealerships, the new dealerships, they make a lot of their money on the incentives
Sure.
for number of units sold and things from from corporate. And so, yeah, they might start getting creative because if they're not making any money on the cars, they're just trying to hit, unit sales goals and different things. But that's coming from someone that has literally zero experience in the car industry. So if that's completely wrong, just ignore that. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up?
That last thing, this is just going off of what you previously said. Price to earnings ratios of the big companies: Nvidia 73, Tesla 61, Amazon 42, Netflix 42, Microsoft 35, Apple 34, Meta 27, S&P 27, Google 23.
NVIDIA's crept back up a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
not anywhere near their all-time high in terms of their peak.
Of
but
what, like 300?
Yeah, it was like 3 something. But yeah, they started creeping back up on their PE. So anyways, well, we appreciate you guys listening. Enjoyed the conversation today. As always, we appreciate the subscribe. If you want to subscribe, give us a like, comment, and we will look forward to talking to you guys next week.